Today, the full Senate Foreign Relations Committee meets to consider 6 nominees for important posts at the Department of State. Michael Posner to be the Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, or DRL. So first I want to say congratulations. I want to say welcome to Senator Durbin, who has come today to say a few words about Ms. Cousin, and Congressman McGovern, who has come to say a few words about Mr. Posner. So, Congressman McGovern.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'm not sure if this is that on? Maybe I'll use this one.
Yes, you're fine.
Madam Chairwoman, I feel privileged to be here today to introduce and very strongly support Michael H. Posner, who has been nominated to serve as Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Labor, and Human Rights. I have known Mike since 1982. He is a friend and he is a mentor. He is a passionate and unrelenting defender of human rights and the rule of law. He is a man of great integrity and impeccable character. There is no one, and I mean no one, in the field of human rights who does not regard Mike as one of the most effective and forceful leaders in the cause of human rights. Mike Posner's nomination and his confirmation sends a powerful signal to the world that the United States of America believes that human rights matters and that it will be a central part of our foreign policy. I am grateful to the President for making this nomination and to Secretary Clinton for supporting his nomination. I believe it is an inspired choice. One of my closest associations with Mike centered on the November 1989 murders of 6 Jesuit priests, their housekeeper, and her 15-year-old daughter, which occurred at the University of Central America in San Salvador, El Salvador, in the midst of the Civil War. The Speaker of the House at that time, Tom Foley, appointed a special bipartisan commission headed by our friend Congressman Joe Moakley from Boston, my old boss, to find out who ordered and carried out these murders. And Congressman Moakley made me his principal staff person. Mike, who at the time was the executive director of the Lawyers Committee for Human Rights, provided legal counsel to the rector and the faculty at the Jesuit-administered UCA, the university. I was so impressed with Mike's clear-sighted advice and unflappable nature in the face of such a highly volatile and dangerous environment. He was a central player in determining the awful truth of what happened, that a group of Salvadoran military officers ordered the killings, that Salvadoran soldiers were responsible for the murders, and that there was a cover-up of this terrible crime. He was also key in dealing with a number of refugee issues regarding Central American refugees during that volatile time in the 1980s. Madam Chairwoman, hundreds of human rights advocates, hundreds of students at Yale Law School and Columbia University Law School, scores of members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, dozens of U.S. military leaders and executive branch officials have benefited over the years from Mike's insight and advice on the many human rights challenges facing U.S. foreign and military policy. It is now time for our nation to take advantage of his profound knowledge and wide range of skills and put him to work inside our government by appointing and confirming him to the position of Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Labor, and Human Rights. Thank you.
Thank you for your eloquent words, Congressman. I know you need to run off, but we really take them to heart, and we thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So now I'm going to just give everybody an overview of actually, who's before us here, each one. The first nominee is Michael Posner, a Bernstein Fellow at Yale Law School and the current president of Human Rights First, a non-governmental organization dedicated to building respect for human rights and the rule of law. Mr. Posner is also a visiting lecturer at Columbia Law School in New York, a position he's held for more than 2 decades. If confirmed as the Assistant Secretary for DRL, Mr. Posner will be responsible for promoting democracy, protecting human rights, including religious freedom, and advancing labor rights around the globe. It is no small task, and one that I find particularly important as the chair of the subcommittee that oversees human rights, democracy, and global women's issues. What I want to do is we'll start with Mr. Posner. We'll work our way down. What I'd like you to do is introduce your families and keep your statements to 4 minutes because there's a lot of you. And the fact that there aren't a lot of people here is a very good sign. I mean, it may sound counterintuitive, but it means nobody is worried about these nominations. So take heart in that. So remember, introduce your families, please, if they are here, and then give us your 4-minute statement. Mr. Posner.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'd like to introduce my wife, Deborah Korsnick.
Please stand when you're introduced so we can.
Our children, Alexander, Hannah, and Daniel. And my mother, Elizabeth Posner, here from Chicago.
Welcome, everybody.
I'm honored to come before you today, and I'm deeply grateful to the President for this nomination and to Secretary Clinton for her great support. I also want to thank Congressman McGovern for his kind words. 31 years ago, I testified for the first time before this committee about the findings of a report I had written about human rights abuses under Idi Amin's regime in Uganda. Senator Mark Hatfield eventually persuaded Congress to impose a total trade ban on Uganda, and my Ugandan friends rejoiced. The United States government, the most powerful force on this earth, had stood up to Idi Amin. Within a year, Amin was ousted by his own people. It was the first time, but by no means the last, that I have seen and been part of an effort to harness the power of the United States government as a force for good. I saw it again in our work with Andrei Sakharov and other dissidents in the former Soviet Union. I experienced it when President Reagan stood behind Philippine People's Power and helped ensure a successful transition of power from Marcos to Aquino. I saw it in Northern Ireland, where George Mitchell and the U.S. government provided a roadmap for peace through the Good Friday Agreement. And I witnessed it more recently as the Bush administration, working closely with congressional leaders like Senator Cardin and Voinovich, took a leading role in challenging European anti-Semitism and other forms of racial and religious hatred. For 3 decades of advocacy, I have looked to the United States government as an ally and seen firsthand its enormous moral authority and capacity to lead on human rights and democracy. It's part of what Secretary Clinton has referred to as the smart power of the United States. Today, I come before you today to join this effort more directly. As this country confronts new global challenges, our historic commitment to human rights will make us even stronger as a nation. It will advance U.S. interests and set a standard that will serve as a beacon around the world. President Obama put it best during his recent visit to Cairo. He said, all people yearn for certain things: the ability to speak your mind, have a say in how you're governed, confidence in the rule of law and the equal administration of justice, government that's transparent and doesn't steal from its people, the freedom to live as you choose. That framework can and should guide U.S. policies everywhere. If confirmed, it will be my job to make the best case for why the advancement of human rights and democratic principles is vitally important, both in its own right and because it serves the long-term national interests of the United States. I'm committed to working with you, Senator Boxer, and your colleagues, mindful that our nation's commitment to democracy and human rights transcends any partisan political differences. In closing, I would like to just share a word about my family's personal experience. My grandparents emigrated to this country from Europe in the early 1900s, eventually settling in Chicago, where my parents were born. Many members of our family that remained behind became the victims of Nazi brutality, and some were lost in the Holocaust. But 2 of my great-uncles living in France survived, and they became leaders of the Maquis, the French resistance to Hitler. They were family heroes. As a young boy, I heard these stories, and I internalized 2 important lessons. The first is that governments that fall into the hands of dictators and demagogues are capable of unspeakable brutality and horror. The second, more hopeful lesson is that courageous people can and often do stand up to oppression, and it's our duty to help them. These lessons have guided my life, and if I'm confirmed, they will continue to guide me in my role as Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor. I'm honored to have this chance to serve my country. Thank you. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much for those eloquent words.